Good morning. And as it's another 35-degree day outside, that's Celsius for you Americans. Let's get into this discussion before it gets too hot for me to wear jerseys, as it did yesterday. The Toronto Maple Leafs are now the number one team in the league. 35, 23, and 12. Chicago, right up to number two again. The Chicago Blackhawks are extremely strong during this era. And it is almost unfathomable that they won't win another Stanley Cup after 1961. They're 32, 21, and 17. Montreal, starting to finally fall from the graces of the league. 28, 19, and 23. The Detroit Red Wings then come in at 32, 25, and 13. The New York Rangers and the Boston Bruins, there is this tremendous gap. And this is kind of what I was talking about, where there are the haves and the have-nots. And it's not even close. It really isn't. 56 points, 77 points. So there were no really, white-knuckle moments. Will my team make the playoffs? Pretty much right out of the gate. Rangers 22, 36, and 12. Boston, again, doesn't show up. 14, 39, and 17. These are dark times for the Boston Bruins. I don't think the best answer to losing every year to Montreal in the playoffs is not making the playoffs. I think that's a bad way of figuring things out. Anyways, the entry draft began in 1963. And I've discussed the entry draft. I've got a series that I've started, and I will get back to on rating the best draft picks at certain spots in the draft. And so I'll just cover the number one draft pick for each year and maybe do a bit on how well their career turned out. November 7, 1962, Glenn Hall is pulled out of a game due to a back injury. It's game number 502. So that ends his streak, and it'll never be matched again. We are now getting into the era where backup goaltenders are actually a thing. Teams are carrying more than one goaltender. April 8th, 1963. Dave Keon of the Toronto Maple Leafs is the first player to record two shorthanded goals in the same game. So Keon, a very versatile forward. Leafs are going to miss him when he goes. James Norris offered Stafford Smythe, who was an owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs, $1 million for Frank Mahovlich, which told Frank Mahovlich he was worth $1 million. Stafford Smythe only turned the offer down because he would have had to take it to the committee, the council that ran the Leafs, and he knew it would never get through council. So rather than the potentially damning selling of Frank Mahovlich, he didn't do it. And it got out, and fans weren't happy about it at the time either, that Frank Mahovlich, who was a star and the best player the Leafs had at times, they're just going to sell him? That's a really bad idea. Johnny Bower, not Bowers. Bowers will be mixing him up with Shane Bowers. Johnny Bower posts a 1.60 goals against in the playoffs at age 38. I put a question mark there. And this lied to enlist is because at age 15, he enlisted for the Army. He lied about his age to get into the Army. He ended up being honorably discharged with rheumatoid arthritis, but he lied to go over and fight in World War II. 38's with a question mark because nobody really knew how old he was. He was very coy about his age because he felt that if people knew how old he was, he wouldn't get a job in the NHL. Right now, somewhere Jaromir Jagr's going, damn it, I knew there was a secret. And so there was speculation that he was anywhere from 38 to 45, 46. How old is he? And as far as I can tell, and I looked into it before I posted this and put everything on the board, 38 was correct. He was 38. But again, the fact that nobody really knew, that kind of shows how Bauer was awesome. Hart Trophy went to Gordie Howe of Detroit. The Art Ross went to Gordie Howe of Detroit. The Norris Trophy went to Pierre Pilote of the Chicago Blackhawks. So finally, somebody other than Doug Harvey's allowed to have the award. The Calder goes to Kent Douglas of the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Vezina went to Glenn Hall of the Chicago Blackhawks. Davey Keon of the Toronto Maple Leafs gets the Lady Byng. And the number one draft pick, Gary Monahan of the Montreal Canadiens, is the first ever draft pick. Monahan had an okay career, but the draft really was kind of treated like an afterthought. The draft was not important until much later. And I think the real game changer was the whole Guy Lafleur schmozzle that took place, in that Montreal kind of probably, the trade offer they made to the California Seals was probably along the lines of, they're not going to take this. California took it and they went, okay, and then off they went. And we'll get into what Montreal did to make sure that they were getting Guy Lafleur. It was really kind of genius. And dirty at the same time if you were a California fan. Thankfully for them, California didn't really have a whole lot of fandom either, and wouldn't last very long in Oakland. First team All-Stars, Mikita. So again, as I mentioned yesterday, I've been getting a lot of people saying, when are you going to do a Stan Mikita video? I've been talking about Stan Mikita in these history videos for almost a week now. The fact that he passed away is a coincidence, and yet I feel like I'm covering each year of his career. So doing this, I feel, is just as good as doing a tribute. So there's Mikita, Gordie Howe, Frank Mahovlich, not sold, Pierre Pilote, Carl Brewer, Glenn Hall, first team. Second team, Henri Richard, Andy Bathgate, Bobby Hull. Tim Horton. That's right, that Tim Horton. He was a hockey player. There's a whole generation coming up that's going, Hortons, and it's like, you know, he's a hockey player, right? And if you don't commit to a Tim Hortons, and for Americans, you're like, what's a Tim Hortons? Canadian. It should be American, though. Your donuts aren't as good as Tim Hortons. I'm just saying the truth. And if you say Dunkin' or Krispy Kreme are good. I'm not saying that off the belt they're not good, but I would still prefer Tim Hortons. Off the belt, that's a nice way to get people in, though. They just melt right in your mouth. Anyways, Tim Horton, before he invented the donut, he was, I know he didn't actually invent the donut. I have to watch my sarcasm. Before he invented the donut, he was a hockey player, and he played for a very long time. Vasco's the other second team All-Star, and of course Terry Sawchuk of the Detroit Red Wings is second team there. Sawchuk is getting close to being a goaltender for an expansion team, as is Hall. Playoffs, and for anybody wondering, yes, when 67 rolls around, I'll have to change how I do the entire board, but I'm going to change how I do the entire board. So be surprised at how well things still fit. Toronto beats Montreal, both 1 and 2. They win 3-1 and 3-2. Toronto wins game 3, 2-0 to go up 3-0. Montreal wins game 4 to avoid being swept 3-1, and then Toronto wins game 5, 5-0. So again, that's the Johnny Bower factor. Detroit and Chicago then play against each other. Chicago's at home for the first 2 games. They won 5-4 and 5-2. Detroit wins both at home, 4-1 or 4-2 and 4-1, and then wins game 5, 4-2, and game 6, 7-4. So Chicago wins the first 2 and wins nothing the rest of the series. Detroit, led by Gordie Howe, moves on to the Stanley Cup final. So it is another wasted year for Bobby Hull and the boys in Chicago. And in the finals, it's Detroit and Toronto, 2 teams that know each other very well over their histories that I've been documenting in this series. Toronto wins 4-2. Toronto wins 4-2. Game 3, Detroit wins that one 3-2. Toronto wins game 4, 4-2. And game 5, they win 3-1. So they barely break a sweat on the scoreboard. I'm not saying it was really easy in real life, because it never is. But they win it in 5. And this is back-to-back Stanley Cups for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And we're getting to that period where the Leafs are going to be challenged and unable to get back. But at this stage, they still have Mahovlich. They still have Davey Keon. They still have Johnny Bower. They have a lot of legends. And it's good times for Toronto. So there you go. 1962-63 season. And your winners, the Toronto Maple Leafs. And fading are Montreal, but they're going to be coming back soon because that's what Montreal does during this period, during this point in time in history. And even past expansion, Montreal's going to have some nice runs. So there you go. My Montreal jerseys will be needed again soon. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. I'll talk to you again soon.